Ken, thank you. Welcome. Thanks for doing this interview for all of your current and your future students. Let's start off, Ken. I have some questions I'd like to ask you so we can better inform our viewing audience here. How old were you when you began training?
I always say that, some would say I was 17 because that's when I started karate, but really at 15 I started wrestling. To this day I still think it's one of the most realistic things that I did for years, you know. More people are training wrestling than anything in schools, and I count that as part of my martial art training.
So, and what year was that?
God, that was in '69.
Wow. Oh, man. So you've been at this many, many years.
Yeah, I guess 40, maybe 46 now, something like that, yeah.
Well, what was it, was wrestling you consider your first martial art pursuit? Or
I did, yeah. A lot of people go, why do you, Bruce Albach, you say, why do you consider that martial art? And I go, well, for one thing, the conditioning up until I did Muay Thai was much more practical and complete for fitness than a lot of the other so-called martial arts I ever did until I hit Muay Thai, you know, and then later others. But yeah, and I mean, it's, you know, like, you know, half the time fights on the street, grappling, or they go to the ground. And I thought that was a great route, that was a great base, even though that was a sport and not really a combat art, it was still relevant.
What, now you call your course of instructor right now I.M.A. for Integrated Martial Arts.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly does that mean to you?
Yeah, I'm just trying to be descriptive, you know. Going back to, I guess, about the fourth art I was ever in the early 70s, I connected with a guy at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, who had started about a year and a half previous in Bruce Lee's art. You know, we had a direct connection. He was training with a couple of guys in East St. Louis, Carl James, Mike Sandlin. Carl used to travel to California and went on a mission, and he met Danny Inosanto, one of Bruce Lee's students, and a guy who brought the Filipino martial arts out of the woodwork. And Carl started studying all the JKD stuff initially, and then the Filipino martial arts. And so, you know, we're connected to the original group from St. Louis that did those arts. But the principles, the concepts in Bruce's Jeet Kune Do were how, it's a process on how to look at arts, and basically, to keep the answer short, to learn how to distill from arts things that you can make work, that work for your body type, your mentality, etc. And then find out how to share that and teach it with other people. So it's really was about a process of how to learn and how to train and how to keep evolving, so that you're not just following an overly set routine, you know. And so to me, integrated martial arts is my way of expressing that, integrating the best elements. I don't mean to say best, the elements from other arts that work the best for me, and then figuring out ways to train those and create drills to teach that to other people. So it's integrating martial arts. So it's just a descriptive title.
Now, I understand, Ken, over the years, there's some confusion sometimes when you talk about self-defense versus karate versus all these different names.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me, what about self-defense? How much of your I.M.A. is self-defense?
I would consider basically all of it is. Because I always feel like, you know, if what you do is something that comes from originally from military combat art, that's the root of all the martial arts generally, right? It needs to remain practical, and in doing that, it has to be practical in this day and age here. In other words, a lot of really stylized traditional martial arts, they're excellent. They train attributes of timing and speed and flexibility, etc. All of them do that. But a lot of the traditional arts that people are trying to, I'd say the preservationist type martial artists, I would call them, a lot of the stuff's not relevant, you know, to what happens on the street in the way true self-defense situations go down. It's not practical, you know. A lot of these things are geared to be fighting ancient types of weapons that nobody carries anymore, you know. So to me, that's one of the big differences. To keep it evolving, continue to do my research, and to keep addressing issues that come to me from police officers that train with us, guys in the military actively, and keep the art alive and moving, and and adapting to realistic applications.
Okay, so that's where the integration comes in, of all these martial arts together.
Yeah.
Well, do you have a desire at this point to ever plan or getting your art really big and with a large school or several locations?
No, I had potentially what was an opportunity to do that back in the 80s when I was the general manager and a full-time instructor at California Martial Arts Academy right here in Maplewood, Missouri. You know, I had some guys approach me when I had decided that I was going to kind of go off on my own, and they were willing to bankroll a nice school for me, and these guys were pretty well off. And I came to the conclusion that Bruce Lee came to a long time ago when he had a really large opportunity to open a chain of schools. You know, he was in Hollywood and knew a lot of actors and a lot of wealthy producers, etc. And he passed, and I applaud his integrity for that, because I feel the same way, that you get too big, and to bring the people through the door, you have to start to, I'll say, water things down in a way to make them more palatable for more people. It becomes more and more of just a fitness class and less of a real interactive martial training course, you know. And I've seen this happen with other arts here in town. You know, if they want to do that, that's fine. Just don't lie to people and say that's self-defense training, you know. But that's why I have no interest in that, and that's why I'm a property manager, you know, and this is on the side, because I've been involved in it when I was a GM of California Martial Arts. I saw what had to happen over the years. We had to make things more and more palatable. We had to make things more fit the structure of the other so-called more traditional Asian arts around, with belts and all that stuff. And you know, I have no interest in that. I want to keep it pure to its reason for being, and not water anything down.
Okay. Well, in conjunction with that, Ken, what would you say are what are some of the major benefits of training? And is it just about self-defense, or is it about competing also?
Yeah, good questions. Competition? Absolutely not. Two reasons. One, I always felt, and you know, when I worked for Jay, who owned California Martial Arts, we adamantly disagreed about this. I always felt that was not ethical, you know. And his line was, "You're like one of the best fighters in this whole school. Yeah, this could bring people into school and this and that." And I go, it is not ethical or moral in my mind to harm another human being for money. Where do you draw the line? You know, how does that really make me any better than a thug who gets paid to beat some guy up because he's laid on a loan to a loan shark? You know, it's not ethical. Now, in training realistically, have I hurt people and have they hurt me? You better believe it. You know, what I've learned over the years is more and more ways to train very realistically and do very minimal, minor damage ever. You know, we've learned more sophisticated ways to still train realistically, in some ways more realistically, without hardly any injuries at all. But to injure people for a trophy or for money, no way. Don't believe in it. It's about self-defense. I want everything that we do to be practical. You know, there's no fancy stuff. We try to do things that make you adaptable in situations. We create scenarios and we work our way through these various scenarios to learn how to combine intuition with breathing and relaxation in order to free yourself up to escape. It's not about winning. It's not about beating somebody up. You could be setting yourself up for a lawsuit. That's not ethical either. Just because you have the skills and just because maybe someone who's got mental issues for one reason or another attacks you, it doesn't give you the right to harm them. It gives you the right to do what you need to do to escape. And I think the law pretty much says this too. You know, they tell you your job is to escape. And you darn well better establish, if you hurt somebody in a self-defense situation, whether it's a firearm or whatever, you need to establish why you couldn't run and escape. Because you don't have the right. The law doesn't give you the right to hurt somebody just because they tried to hurt you. If you're forced to do that, because that's the only way to escape, that's another story. So that's important for people to get that, you know. And that's the angle we come at, and that's how we teach. This isn't a martial art movie. You know, you beat the hell out of some guy. This is about doing what it takes to escape.
Okay.
Which could be pretty involved, potentially. But, you know, that's why you have to train at levels beyond, hopefully, what would ever happen to you.
So keep out of harm's way.
That's the idea, you know.
Well, Ken, let me ask you, and this sort of ties in what we've been talking about already. How would you compare and contrast what you have trained in and incorporated over the decades with the numerous arts from various cultures, and which ones have been the greatest influence on you?
Yeah, it's been quite an experimentation process, you know, because in the early days of doing Bruce Lee's approach, there wasn't really anything going on the ground, you know. That was pretty much, and I think he went through that evolution himself. Later in his last years before he passed away, I know Gene LaBelle, the famous grappler, Bruce was training with him, and you know, one of Bruce's top students, Larry Hartzell, was a good grappler, and so, you know, it's all the UFC stuff with the Gracie family and all the MMA that's out there now. They brought all this, they drove this plane home. Anybody that's been in fights in their real life, what those guys say, there's a lot of truth to it. That some will say fights always go to the ground. Now that's BS, and because I've been in real fights that didn't go to the ground, and you even see that in MMA now. There's getting to be some guys that are good on their feet. It doesn't always go to the ground, but a high percentage of the time it does. So even if you don't like being on the ground, which from a realistic self-defense standpoint, I don't like it, because you're the most vulnerable there. If somebody's attacking you, you don't know who's around that's going to come up and help them, and you're vulnerable, you know. So here again, the way we train on the ground is more about a lot of work to escape staying on the ground, you know. So those elements have come in, and I would say, of all the things I've done that I've gotten the most out of as far as any single arts, I would still go back to the roots of Bruce Lee's approach as far as the analysis approach, you know, and learning how to be creative, figure out what works for you, be a problem solver with situations that people bring to you. And then more recently, in the last 4 years, one of my old students from the I.M.A days went to Russia. He saw a little ad in Black Belt magazine called Vladimir Vasiliev up in Toronto, and went to Russia. I think at this point now it's been, because I've been with Bill about 4 years, almost 4 years. I think at this point that might have been 15 years ago, 16 years ago. The Russian martial art, there's one called Systema. A guy named Mikhail Ryabko is the head man in that branch, and his right-hand man, Vladimir Vasiliev, and Bill trained with them and came back and brought this stuff to show me about 4 years ago. And I would say it's the single most complete martial art I've ever seen, as far as it addresses all those things already. These guys, Bill and I like to joke that the Russians must have been the original JKD guys, which is the Bruce Lee's name for his thing, Jeet Kune Do, the way the intersection, because they've already gone so far beyond what he was trying to do, I think, and how to integrate things, make an art that's able to handle anything that you could humanly possibly handle with, you know. So I'm going to pretty much say probably the old JKD and more recently the Russian martial arts Bill's been teaching are probably the single two already more complete arts that I've been in. I've learned a lot from all the other stuff I've done too. Some of the karate arts. Chen Tai Chi really helped me with body mechanics and fluidity a long time ago. It made it a little easier to train with what Bill's been presenting to us. I've taken a lot of things from Aikido and Aikido Jiu-Jitsu. That's how I learned a lot of locking and stuff. Did some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for, I guess, 3 or 4 years with probably the original group in St. Louis with Jay D'Amato and a few other guys. They trained with Hickson Gracie and Megaton Diaz, and Jay would go out to California and train with the Machados out there. And then that started really reintroducing the ground element, which is where I started in sport wrestling, you know, just the ground element, you know. So, but in a more realistic way. So I'd say probably the JKD, the Gracie work, and the Russian martial art. Those three were probably the most practical. Muay Thai too, just elbows and knees. Filipino Kali, a lot of knife work, you know. They all have good stuff, you know. They all have good stuff. But my job is to maybe try to eliminate things from those arts that were something special to the people that created them. That I don't see a lot of practicality working with a dagger in one hand and a sword in the other than it's good for a little coordination and reflexes. But when you only have so many hours a week to train, you have to limit things and keep it more practical. It's all great stuff though. It's really excellent. A lot of it's really pretty and fun too, you know. But I'm trying to stay more practical.
Okay, so it sounds like it's a whole compilation of stand-up on the ground, so you're doing a little of everything, it's just not one.
Yeah, on the ground,
So,
on your
okay.
stomach, on your back, fighting on your knees, fighting and sitting in a chair next to a guy like you would be in a Metrolink car, being attacked in your automobile from behind, a guy's choking you. I haven't done any of the water training yet, other than when I was going through certification to be a scuba diver years ago, and instructors would hold you underwater to make you panic to feel what it's like to drown. But there's even fighting training in the water that Bill's learned, through the Russian art. We're going to try to do that this summer. But the idea is to be able to address these attack scenarios from every which way they come, and weapons, no weapons,
Okay. Well, I noticed today you got on fatigues and your I.M.A. shirt. How come you don't wear traditional clothes like other arts?
Well, the perfect question. Couple of reasons. One is this is not a traditional art. This isn't an art that you can trace the lineage to, ancient feudal Japan or Korea or China or even the Philippines. I mean, there are elements of a lot of those arts that I've been involved in over the decades. But because what I'm doing has elements put together in my way, right? Expressing myself through those elements, those types of uniforms don't really fit, We're more modern. I like our so-called uniform to be as close as is practical to how people dress on the street. The reason for the old military fatigues is they're pretty inexpensive. They're double stitched. We do a lot of work with you grabbing clothing in order to take people down. We use their own clothing to choke them. We use clothing as weapons. So these things are really durable, and they have pockets. So we can train ourselves in learning how to see if a guy's hiding a weapon by practicing that, by hiding the weapons ourselves in our training and learning how to trap that weapon before it can get out, and how to identify if a person's carrying a weapon. And so the big pockets and the ruggedness of these pants, and yet the fact that they're more like street clothes, So that's the reason why.
So part of your art then also is involved with weapons too, just not handing some weapons. Okay.
And not feudal Japan weapons and stuff like that. It's more about edged weapons in particular, because they're still popular and available all over the place. Also, that type of training brings out much higher levels of timing and reflex dealing with a knife, plus dealing with the fear induced by metal touching your body and being plunged into your body. So knife work's very, very important for fear control, sight training too, as well as brings out timing and reflexes and sensitivity to touch that other things don't bring out just doing an empty hand, right? So learning how to disarm that, and also working with very close range with handguns, disarms. Hopefully somebody attacking you would be dumb enough to touch you with the weapon. I mean, it gives you the best chance, or to be very close, Although they're, so mainly those blunt objects, different kinds of sticks. We'll play around with rolled up magazines as a weapon to create makeshift weapons. So we do a lot of work sometimes with shorter sticks, which was a big thing when we did Filipino martial arts too. So we still do that, to be able to pick something up and use it as a weapon, kind of makeshift. Longer weapons, like a little longer stick, would be more like how you could use a broomstick or mop handle, and use that as a weapon. They're good training tools too. There's a lot of things you can do with them even for fitness and conditioning that are unique to those levers,
Well then, I probably already know this answer from what your previous answers have been, but how do you feel about belts and the certification programs and martial art organizations in general?
Yeah, the whole belt deal is, I think it's out of control. I think it's very ego enhancing, I think it's natural for people as they evolve in their training they're going to develop some ego at times because they see themselves getting stronger and more confident. And, especially younger guys, they feel like they're Billy Badass, ooh, man, look what I just did, blah, blah, blah. But what also keeps happening if people training you are training you right is, including the instructors themselves, you still have to fail. If you're growing and learning, you're still going to always confront something that you've never done before or something that brings up fear, and you're going to fail sometimes. This is very good training because it cuts that ego down, because you're going to look bad in front of the other guys in class, okay? And it's to get you over that, everybody's going to look bad. It's not about how you look, it's more about survival and what you can do. So we want to keep challenging our egos as much as we're challenging our bodies and our abilities to control our fear with our breathing and tension release work. So those elements are really important, you know. So the belts tend to enhance all that and create more ego. It's a commercial tool. It's a carrot to dangle so that the guy keeps coming to class to get the belt. I want people to keep coming to class because of the intrinsic value of the training. You know, to realize that once they get past the first few years of self-defense aspects, they're getting into the deeper reasons for training, which is all about how to deal with confrontations. You know, a lot of the stuff we act out is metaphor that can be translated to other parts of life. You know, the more you learn how to control your own anger comes from being afraid, okay? The more you can deal with other people's and learn how to calm them down and dissipate and not amp it up in yourself. And to de-escalate situations at home with your kids, your wife, out on the street, fender bender situation, to be calm, to not throw kerosene on, and to learn how to stick your ego aside, realizing that if you let that crazy ego out too much, you're probably going to get yourself in some big trouble that's not legal, that's not moral, not ethical, you know. So there's a lot of psychological training going in there. I think it's more and more important and impactful as you continue to train over the years. So the belts to me are just a silly symbol. All we do is, you know, maybe if a guy gets to a point after years and I think, hey, this guy's got the knack, and I wouldn't mind him, you know, I would be comfortable with him teaching how I package things or how I put things together. I would give him a certificate. So he's got something to show somebody. If he goes to a YMCA or something, what's your credentials? Here's this. Here's my resume attached to it, the training I've done. Here's the guy you can call and he'll explain what we've done. Other than that stuff has no meaning, I think.
Okay. It's like the infamous Bruce Lee you've mentioned several times, always said when he was asked, what type of black belt do you have? He goes, the one holding up my pants. Now,
well, here's one here.
There you go.
Leather belt with a buckle. And there is a reason for this too, because there are things we do with belts as a weapon and as a way if you have to restrain someone, hold them for the police. It's going to be used like handcuffs. There's some pretty neat things you can do with belts.
They're a weapon.
Plus, you know, we attack and pull people to the ground a lot of times. If you're not wearing a belt, next thing you know, your garanimals are showing. So it also does really help to hold the pants up.
So this is not for kids, though. We're talking about the kids class. Which reminds me, when are your group classes, your workshops, and tell us a little about your private lessons offered, Ken.
Yeah, right now I train in my home studio on Tuesday and Thursday nights, roughly from 6:30 to 8 or 8:30. I do Saturday mornings from generally 9 to 11. Saturdays in particular, we have tendencies sometimes to go considerably overtime if everybody's got time and people are refreshed because they had a nice long night's sleep after a work week, and then we'll do that. Workshops, I try to pick one of the areas that we train in and specialize in it for a 3 or 4 hour workshop, maybe once a month. You know, it doesn't always happen that frequently. And the way I work all this is to just pop into classes is $15 a class. People that prepay, you know, we just have basically a verbal agreement, and I just keep track. And if they give me $100 at the beginning of the month, they get 8 classes for that, which means they've just dropped their per class rate down to $12.50, which I think in this day and age, compared to contracts in these big martial arts schools and you're stuck there forever, it's like, no, our agreements are month to month.
Okay.
If you don't want to be there, I don't want you there either, because you're just going to slow down other people. I want the door to be open. You're going to be here because you want to. I won't chase after you and, you know, try to talk you into something you don't want to do, you know.
Do you have an age preference?
You know, it's not carved in stone, but I generally like people to be at least 18, you know, at least 18, and a mature 18. Because some of the stuff we're dealing with is just not appropriate. I mean, we're talking about dealing with disarming edge weapons and stuff, and a gun at close quarters. That's not appropriate for young kids. I would never. When I've done kids classes in the past, there's none of that. I mean, that's just not appropriate. They don't have the maturity for making judgments about this stuff, you know. So I leave it out. What I also do, and what I'm offering more now, is private instruction. And the way I've always done that is, really things work out to about $60 an hour. Which here again, somebody with as much experience as I have, I think that's a very reasonable hourly rate for anything these days. I see people with a certificate as personal trainers that have done it for 6 months and they're charging way more than that. So I think I'm giving people good value for their money, and I allow up to 4 people to share a private lesson. So, you know, if you do the math, if they take an hour, which I sell it that way a lot, people could take an hour, $60, right? 4 people share it, they're only paying 15 bucks a piece. You have training partners. I video record the class. Each person gets a copy of that DVD so that they can go back to their little gym or their backyard or their basement. They can train off of that. So it can keep it very reasonable, because if they're diligent and they're disciplined, they can take 1 private lesson a month, and in 1 hour, or 2 if they choose, I can give them enough material, enough drills to work on, that as a group they can go home, take that, they've got it all right there, they can make their notes and they can train. I'll see you next month.
Are you accepting new students right now? And
Yeah.
if you are, what's your criteria for that?
Yeah, I'm getting kind of picky about that after the years. You know, in group class, I won't take new people anymore who don't already have some background. The reason I like people to have background is, one, they seem to be able to catch on quicker to what we're doing and why, and they tend to stick with it. I like that they already have the discipline to show up and train, and they're already used to contact. I also don't want to slow down the group classes with a lot of new people coming in. You know, I feel like the guys that have been coming regularly, I want to keep them training at the level they're at, and help them to be able to get better without slowing them down. I like beginners to go through a separate program, and then eventually mix them in. If they're serious, then I'll invite them to come to the group class and mix them in later.
Oh, would this also be for men and women?
Sure.
Both? Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So, this is going to be a loaded question, but since you are the founding member, the founder of I.M.A, and your chief senior instructor, what really sets apart your I.M.A from other arts or schools?
Well, I think we've touched on most of that already. We don't have written contracts, we don't have belts, we don't have trophies, we don't have competitions. What we do have is a really high level of great camaraderie. You know, people start coming to these classes a lot due to the fact that they want to see their buddies. And it's pretty cool because they feel safe. You know, it's not some guy with an ego trip walking in who's trying to test his skills. Although the skill testing comes up, and it comes up pretty intensely at times. But it's not about some guy who's trying to come in here and do some cheap shot thing and hurt somebody to bolster his ego. So we don't have all that stuff going on. So that's one of the other aspects about it. I'm picky and choosy about the kind of people that are in here. You know, so.
Okay. All right, well, good deal. And how, last but not least, people are interested, how do they contact you to find out more information about your art, I.M.A, the classes, etc.?
Yeah, they can, the easiest thing to do, and probably the best thing to do, is just to email me at PDS, which would be like Paul, David, Sam, and then K-E-N, Ken, my name Ken, and then O-N, which is the first 2 letters of my last name, O'Neill. So PDS, Kenon at earthlink.net, and tell me what you're looking for. And I have a bit of an interview process that I put people through, and I even try to meet people at a coffee shop or something and meet them face to face and get a feel for their energy, what kind of person they are, their attitude, before I invite them into my home. You know, especially since it's my home, it's not a public venue anymore. A lot of times I'll travel to other people's homes. Or some people have a deal with the gym where they can use a back room, and for private lessons I'll do that stuff, but the group stuff's right here.
Well, and where is right here?
In Richmond Heights.
Richmond Heights?
Because it's central, you know. Highway 40, Highway 70, 270, 4455 are all very close to where I live. Highway 40 is within half a mile, so it makes it easy for people to get here too.
Okay.
One of the reasons I bought this place.
So
easy to get to.
So again, then it's you can reach Ken at PDS Kenon at earthlink.net.
Yep.
Thanks so much, Ken.
Okay, buddy.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Slice of life. Thank you.
Yeah,
buddy.
thanks, pal. See you.